It was one of those quiet Saturday mornings where everything felt safe. I was standing in the living room, folding a pile of warm laundry, the smell of lavender still clinging to the fabric. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, soft and lazy, like the day itself had no rush. I remember thinking about pancakes, maybe running to the store later. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but instinct told me to pick up. "Hello?" I answered, already bracing for a scam call or wrong number. But then, that voice. Soft. Nervous. "Hi. Is this Laura? It's Camille." My heart stopped for half a second. Camille. Eric's ex. I hadn't heard her name in years. My brain scrambled to place her tone, to make sense of why she'd be calling me. "I just needed to clear the air," she said, "to apologize." Apologize? My stomach tightened. I kept my voice steady. Apologize for what? That's when she hesitated. And I mean really hesitated, like she'd just realized she stepped onto a minefield barefoot. Then she asked it, "Wait, you don't know?" My whole body went cold. "Know what, Camille?" I pressed, even though my instincts were already screaming. The silence that followed wasn't just uncomfortable. It was loud. And then, like a secret unraveling too fast, she said it. "We've been seeing each other again." I froze. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. It felt like someone had poured ice water straight down my spine. My hands, still holding a t-shirt, started to shake. Camille must have realized what she'd done, because she immediately started backpedaling, talking too fast, too soft, saying she thought he'd told me, and didn't mean for it to come out this way. I could barely hear her over the roaring in my ears. My heart was pounding so hard it was painful. "I thought he was going to come clean soon," she mumbled. Those words. Come clean. Like they were doing me a favor by eventually telling me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something, but all I could do was stand there, staring at the phone like it had betrayed me too. "How long?" I finally whispered. She hesitated again, then quietly, "A few months." My knees nearly gave out. Months. While I was here folding his clothes, he was folding himself into hers. I don't remember how the call ended. I think I hung up. Or maybe she did. Everything after that was a blur, just the sound of silence and the low throb of humiliation setting in. I stood there in the middle of my living room, holding a towel that wasn't even dry anymore, trying to catch my breath. It felt like the ground had been yanked from under me, but no one had seen it happen. Just me, and a voice from the past that shattered the present. And yet something inside me didn't break. Not yet. I sat down on the edge of the couch, laundry forgotten, phone still in my hand like it might ring again and undo what had just happened. But it didn't. The house was completely still, like it was holding its breath with me. I stared at the wall for what felt like an hour. My mind played back every recent moment with Eric. His late nights, the sudden boys' trips, the half smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes. It all started to click. That phone call cracked something wide open inside me. Not just heartbreak, but clarity. Camille had called thinking I already knew. That meant she wasn't confessing. She was trying to ease her conscience before he could spin his version of the truth. I wasn't just betrayed. I was being managed. And that made something in me shift. Hurt gave way to something sharper. A chill that had nothing to do with heartbreak. I wasn't going to fall apart. Not yet, anyway. Because here's the thing about betrayal. It has layers. And underneath the shock and the sadness, there's a space. A space where decisions get made. Quiet ones. Strategic ones. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. Not exactly. But I knew I wasn't going to tell him I knew. Not yet. He'd just handed me the truth. And he had no idea what I planned to do with it. The hours after that call were slow and surreal. Like I was watching my own life from outside my body. I moved through the house like a ghost, emptying the dishwasher, feeding the cat, answering a few texts like nothing had changed. But everything had. Inside, I was unraveling one thread at a time. I couldn't stop thinking about the way Camille's voice cracked, the way she whispered it like she was doing me a favor. And the worst part? She thought I already knew. But now that I did know, I couldn't unsee anything. Every odd little moment from the past few months rushed back like a reel playing in reverse. Eric suddenly working late all the time, saying he was swamped but never showing signs of stress. The way he flinched when I reached for his phone. That spontaneous weekend golf trip with no photos, no tan, and no stories. I had brushed them all off, because that's what you do when you trust someone. You give them the benefit of the doubt, until they use it to bury you. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Not then. Instead, I went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and opened our phone bill. The details spilled out like evidence in a courtroom. His number and hers, dozens of times a week. Long calls, late at night, during lunch breaks, texts that spiked around the same times he was working late. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a pattern, a strategy. He was living two lives, and I was the stage prop in one of them. I sat there for a long time, staring at those phone records like they might suddenly change, like maybe I was wrong. But I wasn't. The truth was right there in call logs and timestamps, cruel and undeniable. He'd built an entire routine around hiding this. And Camille's call? That wasn't a confession. That was damage control. She was trying to unburden herself, not protect me. And honestly, that stung just as much. It wasn't just betrayal. It was disrespect. Not even the courtesy of a lie to my face. Just silence. A hollow routine. Breakfasts, I love yous, shared pillows, while she tiptoed in and out of his world behind my back. And the worst part? I had felt it. I'd had that itch in my gut for weeks, that quiet knowing we so often smother with hope. Because facing it means you might lose everything. But now? I had already lost something far more dangerous. My trust. Still, I didn't say a word to him that night. He came home like usual, tired, distracted, kissed me on the cheek like nothing had happened. I smiled back. I asked about his day, made dinner, listened to him ramble about office politics I no longer believed existed. And while he spoke, I nodded, even laughed. But inside, I was already gone. Not emotionally, strategically. Because something in me had clicked into place. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to take my time. I slept beside him that night, listening to his breathing, watching the shape of him outlined in the soft light of the street lamp outside our window. He looked peaceful, safe, like a man with nothing to hide. It made my skin crawl. I laid there, eyes wide open, while the weight of everything pressed down on my chest. But instead of breaking, I started thinking. Really thinking. Not about why he did it. I was done with that. But about what came next. That's when something in me hardened. I wasn't going to beg for answers or fall into his arms crying, asking for closure he'd never give. I deserved better than that. I wasn't his fragile little secret keeper. I was his wife. And if he didn't remember that, I was going to make sure he never forgot what it cost him to underestimate me. So I started sketching a plan. Quietly. Carefully. Not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. Out of something deeper than anger. Because this wasn't just about what he did. It was about how I was going to answer it. On my terms. In my time. I didn't want chaos. I wanted clarity. I wanted him to look me in the eye one day and realize I had known all along, and that I chose to be 5 steps ahead, and I wouldn't need to yell. I wouldn't need to fall apart. No, when it came time, I'd let the truth do all the screaming for me. The next morning, I woke up early. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There was something powerful about taking control in silence. I brewed coffee, sat at the table with my laptop, and typed "private investigator" near me. It felt strange at first, like something out of a movie. But I wasn't acting. This was real. I had no intention of confronting Eric without evidence so solid it couldn't be spun, denied, or downplayed. I wanted truth with teeth. By noon, I had an appointment for the following day. The investigator was discreet, efficient, and far too experienced in these kinds of things. I told him I wanted confirmation, not because I didn't believe Camille, but because I needed more than her word. I needed timelines, pictures, receipts. I wanted to see where they met, how often, how brazen they'd become. And within days, I had it. Photos of them at a boutique hotel, a dinner downtown, her hand brushing his cheek like it was hers to hold. And the worst part? He looked happy, not guilty, not distant, not conflicted, just happy. Like our life together wasn't even a shadow on his conscience. That image stuck with me more than any explicit proof. It wasn't just infidelity. It was erasure. He had built another world where I didn't exist. And that, more than anything, is what made me sit down with a lawyer the very next morning. Not to talk about if I'd leave, but how. The lawyer was sharp, composed, and didn't waste time on pleasantries, which I appreciated more than I expected. She laid everything out in clean lines: assets, options, leverage. I handed her the file I had been building, printed texts, call logs, bank statements, even the photos. She flipped through it quietly, nodding. "You've done your homework," she said. And I had. Because this wasn't about pain anymore. This was about precision. I wasn't leaving broken. I was leaving prepared. But first, I had to play my part a little longer. So I slipped back into the role of unsuspecting wife. I laughed at his tired jokes. I cooked his favorite meals. I kissed him goodnight. All while the paperwork moved forward behind the scenes. It was exhausting, but empowering too. Like I had a secret strength wrapped in calm. He had no idea. And that was the beauty of it. The more he believed I was in the dark, the more power I had in my hands. Then I planted the final seed, our special dinner. I told him I wanted to cook something nice for the weekend. Just us. No distractions. A cozy night in. He smiled, flattered, completely oblivious. "Sounds perfect," he said, pouring wine like he hadn't just dismantled our life behind my back. I nodded sweetly. But inside, I was already setting the table, not for romance, but for revelation. And trust me, I was going to serve it cold. The days leading up to that dinner were almost surreal. He kissed me goodbye in the mornings, texted me from work like everything was fine. And I played along, every smile more deliberate, every word more controlled. I watched him move through our house, through my life, unaware that every step he took was walking him closer to the edge. The investigator sent over one last batch of photos. They were recent, fresh. Him and Camille, again, arm around her waist, her lips on his neck. I forwarded them to my lawyer without blinking. It was strange how numb I had become to it all. The betrayal wasn't a wound anymore. It was data, evidence. Weight in my favor. The house, the savings, everything we'd built. I was positioning it to fall right into my hands. Not because I was greedy, but because I'd earned it. I'd kept that home warm while he gave his warmth to someone else. Now, I was reclaiming every inch, and he had no idea he was helping me do it. I asked him to pick up dessert on his way home. I told him to wear something nice, said I wanted to feel like we were dating again. He chuckled, told me he liked this new romantic side of mine. I smiled and said nothing, because the night was almost here. The dinner was set, The final move was coming. And the truth? I wasn't nervous. I was ready. That Saturday night, the house smelled like rosemary and roasted garlic. Candles flickered in the dining room. Soft jazz played in the background, one of his favorite old records. Everything looked perfect, cozy, romantic, just the way he liked it. He walked in with a smile and a bakery bag, kissed my cheek and said, "Wow, you really went all out." I nodded. "It's a special night," I replied, and oh, it was. I had invited a few close friends to join us. Last minute, I told him. He didn't question it. Just assumed I wanted company, a little laughter around the table. What he didn't know was that I had chosen very specific people, friends who had known us for years, friends who had believed in our marriage. And, most importantly, friends whose opinions still mattered to him, the kind that might just burn when they hear the truth. We toasted, we laughed, we passed plates of food like nothing was boiling underneath. Then, after dessert, I stood up. "I actually have a little surprise," I said, pretending to fumble with my phone. He looked up, half curious, half distracted. "I had a really interesting phone call earlier this week. Someone wanted to apologize." That got everyone's attention. I tapped play. The room went still. And then Camille's voice spilled out through the speaker, soft, nervous, unmistakable. "We've been seeing each other again." A gasp, a fork hitting the table. And Eric's face? It was the kind of silence you feel. He looked like he'd been struck across the face, eyes wide, mouth open, searching for something to say that wouldn't make it worse. But there was nothing left to protect. Camille's voice kept playing, trembling with guilt, admitting every ugly piece. You could hear the room breathing. No one moved. No one blinked. I didn't look at him right away. I just stood there letting the words hang in the air like smoke from a fire I hadn't started, but I was damn sure going to finish. When the audio stopped, no one spoke. Not for a few seconds. And then I slowly reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out the envelope. Thick, neatly labeled. I walked over and placed it in front of him, like a final course. "This is for you," I said. My voice calm, measured. "And don't worry, your ex already helped me prepare it." That line hit him like a punch. I could see the denial rise in his throat, but it couldn't escape. Not in front of witnesses, not after that. His hands shook as he opened the papers. Divorce, asset division, property ownership, all clean, all legal, all done. He looked up at me, like he didn't know who I was anymore. But here's the thing. I hadn't changed. I had just stopped shrinking. Everyone around the table looked at me differently too. Not with pity, but with something closer to awe. I wasn't the victim of his story. I was the editor. Excuse, half apology, half denial. But I didn't give him the chance. I raised one hand, gentle but firm, and said, "Don't. You've already said enough." And he had. Between the late nights, the lies, the silence, he'd written every line of this ending. The room stayed quiet, watching him squirm. It wasn't rage they saw in me. It was resolve. And that, I think, unnerved him more than if I'd screamed. I wasn't here to make a scene. I was here to end one. He looked around the room for someone to save him. But no one moved. No one would. Our friends weren't stupid. They'd seen enough now to piece the rest together. And I didn't need their sympathy. I had their clarity. I wasn't afraid of being alone at that table. I had been alone for months. The only difference now was that he knew it too. And as he sat there with his guilt laid bare, I collected the dishes like a perfect host, calm, graceful, in full control. That was the part that hit him hardest. Not the recording, not the papers, but the way I didn't fall apart. I had built the entire night like a house of mirrors, letting him catch a glimpse of himself from every angle. No distortion, no excuses, just truth, framed and well lit. And while he tried to catch his breath in a room that suddenly felt too small, I looked across the table at the woman I used to be and nodded. She finally had her moment. The divorce went through faster than I expected. I think he just wanted it over with. Wanted to disappear before the weight of what he'd done crushed whatever dignity he had left. And honestly, I didn't stop him. I kept the house, the savings, the car. But more importantly, I kept my peace. My nights were quiet again, not from loneliness, but from freedom. No more waiting for footsteps that came too late. No more pretending I couldn't smell perfume that wasn't mine. Camille? She didn't stick around. 2 weeks after the dinner, he moved out. 3 weeks later, she was gone. No dramatic goodbye, no public fallout, just vanished. Maybe she realized that if he could lie to me for that long, he could lie to her just as easily. Or maybe she just got what she came for and got bored. Either way, it wasn't my problem. Not anymore. I wasn't interested in their mess. I had cleaned up enough already. And now, the house was mine again. Truly mine. I started repainting, rearranging, pulling his leftovers from drawers and closets and setting them by the door, one box at a time. There was something sacred in the process, like I was reclaiming the air. Every corner I touched felt a little lighter, a little more me. I wasn't just moving on, I was rebuilding. Not as a woman scorned, but as a woman awake. And with every sweep of the brush, I reminded myself, this was the price of freedom, and I had paid it in full. Some days, I'd catch myself reaching for 2 coffee mugs instead of 1. Muscle memory. Habit. But I'd smile and put the second one back. Not in sadness, but in acknowledgement. That version of my life had ended, and this one was just beginning. The quiet didn't scare me anymore. It felt like possibility. I started waking up early, going on long walks, buying fresh flowers just because I wanted to see something bloom. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting on anyone to join me. People kept telling me how strong I was. But strength wasn't what carried me through. It was clarity. The moment I stopped asking why and started asking what now, everything shifted. I stopped clinging to the version of Eric I had loved and started accepting the one I had actually married. That was the hardest part, not the betrayal, but the acceptance. Once I made peace with the truth, I was unstoppable. And the people around me? They noticed. They watched me rise. And they chose me. Friends who had once seemed unsure picked up the phone. Family members reached out with softness in their voices. No one blamed me anymore for being blindsided. They admired me for how I handled it, with dignity, with strategy, with my head held high. I hadn't just walked through fire. I had carried a damn bucket of water, poured it out, and rebuilt from the ashes. And honestly, it looked good on me. The last thing I did was box up the final drawer in the hallway, the one with his old keys, mismatched socks, and random things he never bothered to notice I kept organized. I carried it to the front door, set it down gently, and just looked at it for a moment. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about closure. That box wasn't just filled with junk. It was filled with the version of me who tolerated too much, smiled through too many lies, stayed silent for too long. And she didn't live here anymore. I took one last walk through the house that day. The walls were lighter. The silence was different. Not hollow. Peaceful. I passed the mirror in the hallway and caught a glimpse of myself. Not broken. Not bitter. Just free. I opened the windows, let the air rush in, and breathed in the life I had reclaimed. Not because of him, but in spite of him. And as I tossed his final box into the donation pile, I laughed. Because that phone call, the one that shattered everything, it ended up being a gift. Camille didn't mean to set me free, but she did. She just wanted to apologize. And in the end, I should have thanked her. Not for the confession, not even for the truth, but for lighting the match that burned the bridge I was too afraid to walk away from. She handed me my freedom, and I took it.